I can see you, Kirk.
Chang.
Can you see me?
I'm bloodsucker. You're gonna do your own dirty work now. Do you hear me? Do you?
Set a course. For home.
It's a thing.
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. Shield inside all ships. Resistance is futile.
Good evening, and welcome to Super Tuesday, because if it's Super Tuesday, then you're listening to the Trek Brothers podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Sean.
How's it going, Sean?
I am doing well. How are you, Chris?
I'm okay. You're from California, so you haven't got to vote today, right?
No, we're not a part of that.
I forget everybody who votes on Super Tuesday. It's like every state that's not important, Super Tuesday. I didn't say that. I'm from Colorado, so I just dissed my own state, so don't worry.
Well, that state's important now. It didn't used to be, but it has been the past few election cycles.
Obama changed it. That's what hope and change does to a place.
Yeah.
Man, we have an exciting show today, I think. Because
Yes,
we're talking Voyager.
I think so too.
Anytime we talk Voyager on this show, it gets exciting. I get a little... Did you watch the Oscars, by the way?
I did not watch Oscars. I haven't seen any of those movies. I have no business watching it.
I highly recommend if you watch one movie, actually two, and you can find these online. You should watch Bear Story, that one, Best Animated Short, but you should also watch We Can't Live Without Cosmos, which was nominated for Best Animated Short and ended up losing to Bear Story. But both of those are amazing shorts. In fact, there's even another one. Tomorrow... Oh my god, I can't remember the name. Tomorrowland or something. It's not Tomorrowland. Something. Future Tomorrow or something. Tomorrow something. But that one's really good too. But I highly suggest those.
All right.
Everything else, I've never seen Spotlight.
I'm into animated shorts. Eventually I'll probably watch some of those movies. Like I'll watch the Leo one, the Revenant or whatever it is, at some point. But
He eats a liver in there.
okay.
Well, he's vegan, so he can't be eating that liver. I mean, that won him the Oscar right there, I guarantee you. You don't see Captain Janeway eating no liver. All right, let's get to our wonderful news track.
All hands, brace for impact.
Engage.
So we've got some pretty great news about Nicholas Meyer. You want to say what it is? Because you actually told me about this.
Yeah, well, I found out almost as soon as it was announced. I just happened to be online at the right time, and it's already old news at this point, but it's still new news to the show because we haven't talked about it yet. But Nicholas Meyer is the newest addition to the new Star Trek show coming out next year, and I am extremely excited about this. I love Nicholas Meyer. Star Trek II is by and far my favorite movie, not just my favorite Star Trek movie, just probably my favorite movie, almost my favorite movie of all time. And Star Trek VI is amazing. He did some of the dialogue for Star Trek IV, which is great. And he's great. Everything that he's done with Star Trek has been amazing. I'm familiar, or I guess I should know. I should note that I know other stuff that he's done. However, I don't know it very well. I know he's written some Sherlock Holmes novels, which I'm actually really interested in reading just to see what they are. But anybody that can quote Dickens and Melville off the top of their head has my vote for writing episodes of Star Trek, and that's what he's going to be doing. I think he's one of the executive producers and somewhere in the writing staff.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I think so. The news of this Star Trek keeps getting better to me. So
yeah, with every single thing they talk about that comes out, it's better and better. Not worse and worse, like some people would have you believe. Like some people would have you believe that, we're waiting for like the worst possible series to come out.
Well, I mean, just to relate it to the only other really new Star Trek that we've experienced recently, and the Abrams movies, there was never anything about the Abrams verse, including Abrams and including Jeremy Lin. Is his name Jeremy Lin? Justin Lin. Just anything with the new movies. There's never been anything that they've announced where I'm like, oh man, that sounds awesome. Everything that I've heard about any of the new movies, any of the three of them, including Beyond now, every time something's revealed about one of those as they come out, I'm always like, oh, really? Like it always kind of hurts me. And this new Star Trek show, every time I learn more about it, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds amazing. So,
yeah, I think it's going to be good. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
It is. I think so. I mean, the guy gave us Star Trek 2.
Right?
And that, I mean, arguably, maybe there's some other people out there that disagree with me, or maybe have a little bit of a different opinion than me, but most people that are into Star Trek consider Star Trek 2 one of the best movies, one of the best Star Trek movies, and one of the best things there is about Star Trek. So, I mean, why would you be upset that he's a part of it? Just because he did it before in the 80s? Ooh, like, no, who cares? He did it really well. Bring him back.
Yeah, bring it back. Bring it back, baby. Bring it back. Nice. So there's another little bit of news. It's not even really news. It's more of like something that just happened. And I just don't mean like just happened like news happens. I mean, it just happened. Like, all right. So somebody did a crossover with Star Trek and Hamilton. And I don't know why I put this in here, because I'm not a fan of Hamilton. I am like the only person, like, this is a true story. Let me tell you about this. So I'm sitting there across from my mentor, I'll call him. And this girl that I graduated with. And she's like, "Oh my God, I've heard Hamilton's so amazing." And my professor is like, "Well, how can I get tickets?" And she's like, "You can't get tickets to it. You can't get tickets to it." And he's like, "Well, how does anybody know it's amazing then?" And they're going on and on about how great Hamilton. Like, she's talking about how great Hamilton is. And he's talking about how nobody knows that Hamilton can be great because nobody can go see Hamilton. And I'm just sitting there going like, who wants to see a hip-hop musical about a founding father? Like, so it was kind of weird. And then now this, it's Star Trek, and it's Star Trek and Hamilton together. Something I really like, and something I know that I'm going to hate, like when I see it like in the year 2035. Because you could actually hear it already. You could already download the soundtrack, buy the soundtrack, stuff like that. But I already know that I don't like Hamilton. But so anyway, I just had to throw that out there, that if anybody wants to Google it, they should look this up. And it's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a thing. I read the article that you posted in our notes, but I have not actually heard this mashup.
Do you like Hamilton?
I don't know Hamilton. I mean, I know what it is. It wasn't like I had to research what Hamilton is, but I haven't heard anything from it. I haven't seen anything from it. I just kind of knew what it was about.
They do the hip hop. The hippity hoppity brigade comes in.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying. I mean, hip hop's fine. All right, but the start. Okay, here now I'm gonna get like into this. See what the director tried to do was try to make a point about the nature of hip hop and how hip hop came around, because we can all agree about the urban nature of hip hop and its origins. But what the director tried to do, who is also the writer, is suggest that Hamilton had the same upbringing as somebody that you might find in that type of environment now, that they could be relatable. And I have a real problem with that. In fact, one of the things that's kind of glossed over in it is, do you want to actually know what brings Alexander Hamilton over to America from that tiny little island down there? Is a hurricane. A hurricane ends up coming through the Atlantic, and he ends up writing about it. And Hamilton, young Hamilton, was really into poetry, and he liked to write poetry and stuff like that. And so, like, these people that read the poetry was like, wow, this guy's really good. So they foot the bill to bring him to America for the sole purpose of trying to get him to, come to America, pay for his college and everything. And that's how he ends up in America. And that's Hamilton. Now, how that has anything to do with Star Trek, I don't know. But anyway, it is what it is. It is what it is. But anyway, I just let you know that for no reason. All right. Do you have any other news, Sean? No,
I don't have any other news. But I might want to talk to you a little bit about Alexander Hamilton after this show.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I had that big Hamilton book. I had the Ron Chernow Hamilton book in our house, and I was very into Hamilton for a while. Hamilton's one of those guys that you really, really... It's like Robert E. Lee. Like, you just read about him, and you're like, no, I shouldn't really like this. Shouldn't like this guy. But, like, you just do. Like, you read about their life, and you're just like, damn, that guy's... I want that guy to be, like, my friend. And Hamilton's like that.
The most I know about Hamilton actually comes from you. You gave me a book. The book that was about him and John Adams. Was it Sir... Who wrote that? Young Americans was the name of it.
Oh, yeah, Young Americans. That's a really, really good book.
Yeah, I remember that book fairly well. I still have it. It's actually on my bookshelf. I can kind of see it from here, nice. From where I'm sitting.
So, yeah, and the premise of that book is, these are all young kids that were hanging out. This is the new generation, the Madisons and the Hamiltons, and the stuffy old men. About and the book is Young Patriots, actually, but the sorry, I'm referencing Bowie songs. That's okay. But the thing is, like, the Washingtons of the world are fading away, and that's like something you think is really cool. It makes Washington like a cool guy in his own right, because like he's the older generation. He's the Bernie Sanders, and you need to look towards the future. At the same time, Bernie Sanders is telling you, like, yeah, the future is me. You're like, but you're old. You're the oldest dude in there. All right. Is there that's the news, pretty much.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to verdict check, because this is going to be fun.
Yes.
Consider your verdict.
What is your verdict, Sean?
All right, so I'm on the upside this week, and since we're doing a Voyager episode today, I figured I wanted to talk a little bit about Voyager and just the guest stars that they got in there. Now, Star Trek has kind of a plethora of guest stars throughout all the shows, and some of them have hit it. Most of them, I should say, hit it big later on. Like Ricardo Montalban wasn't that big of a star until after the 60s. Joan Collins, arguably more of a star after the 60s. You get like Terry Hatcher in one of the episodes of Next Generation, but nobody knew who Terry Hatcher was, and that was even before the Superman show. So there's Whoopi Goldberg is probably one of the exceptions to this, but Voyager for some reason on this weird little syndicated sci-fi show on a kind of satellite network or experimental network station throughout its 7 years ended up getting like a massive punch of star power. So just to name a few, and Chris, if you can name more than I'm remembering, like, go for it. But I just want to say Jason Alexander, George from Seinfeld, and this is much after, like, way later after Seinfeld, of course, is in an episode of season 5 called Think Tank, where he plays the mediator of this think tank, basically. The think tank, he's like their spokesperson, if I remember right. That right there in itself is amazing. Jason Alexander is huge, was huge. Anybody from Seinfeld is still huge if they're guest starring on anything. You had The Rock, who, in my opinion, The Rock is bigger now in the acting world than he's ever been because he's actually an actor now. But when he was in Star Trek, he was a wrestler, but he was a hugely popular wrestler at that point in time. And I think he was in season 6. And it's that weird, and he more or less plays a wrestler in the thing. So they kind of catered to what he already did in the, and I don't know how to pronounce the name of the episode, the Sunkatsi, I think is how you say it, from season 6, where they get 7 of 9 to fight in an arena to the death kind of situation, and The Rock's a guest on that. And then you have John Rhys Davies, who played Da Vinci in a couple episodes. He was in Scorpion Part 1, I believe. I don't think he was in both parts, if I remember right. He was, I think, in the beginning of Scorpion, and then in Concerning Flight, which was basically a holodeck episode, which not his fault that it's a holodeck episode. Not great. But John Rhys Davies, of course, is Gimli from Lord of the Rings. He was also in Sliders, and he's I don't remember his character's name, but he was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was the other guy of they're digging in the wrong spot guy. And then you have Andy Dick, and love him or hate him, Andy Dick is kind of a star and a name that we all recognize. And he, of course, was the EMH Mark II in season 4's Message in a Bottle. Basically, it was just him and Robert Picardo. And I always remember him. Andy Dick stands out in my mind in Star Trek for some reason, just because I never really understood why he was there ever. And even rewatching that episode, I still don't really understand why he is there. But Voyager had guest stars, and I don't know how they did it, because the other Star Trek shows didn't really do that, and never really capitalized on it if they could. I mean, the actors themselves became stars in their own right, but while the shows were going on, they didn't get these, maybe not A-list celebrities, but not quite B-list celebrities either. But people that you definitely would recognize their face, recognize their voice, and recognize their name. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. The only one that I would add in there is John Savage. It was amazing that he showed up in Voyager. He was in Equinox. And John Savage is in The Deer Hunter. But he's also, the reason why I know him, which is kind of like a sad reason to be like, I know a guy like this, is because he starred in Hair, in the movie production Hair.
Okay, yeah.
But it's just like one of the best actors ever, like action film actors. And he's totally like a person there to be like, yeah, like that. Like, they'd be like, who? And then when they see him, they're like, no way, I know that guy. Because he's been in, like everything, like literally everything. But, right, is practically nobody.
Yeah. I was just going to think, too, that I missed. Ed Begley Jr. was in that episode where they go back to 90s Earth, and Ed Begley Jr. is at least somewhat famous.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Begley Jr. Oh, Voyager, I love you. Yeah, I was not a fan of the Andy Dick, by the way. Actually, I could forgive the Rock more so than the Andy Dick. And I guess
I like that episode, but I mean I see where you're coming from. The Rock, at least they really played, like, they leaned into him. They didn't give him a part that he wouldn't have been able to do.
Yeah. I have a really bad opinion of Andy Dick for kind of an interesting reason. I really, really love the Howard Stern show. Like, it's one of my favorite things to listen to. And
you brought it up on this show.
Andy Dick is seriously a jerk, like a big jerk, and bit the hand that fed him. Because Howard ended up giving him like this show on the network, and like Andy Dick, just being Andy Dick, like screwed it up and weirded out everybody. So like nobody wanted to work with him. And then he ended up going on this other radio show and blamed it on Howard. And it was just like, oh my God. And Howard took it personal, but yeah, that's one thing you don't do to Howard is you don't, Howard could really like make or break your career. It's insane. It's just insane. And it's insane that he has that power, but people will still cross him. And I think they do it just to see if they can get away with it.
You know how I know that you're a Howard Stern fan?
How's that?
And this is how I can tell people are Howard Stern fans, because when they refer to the Howard Stern show or his show, they always call it Howard. And it's like you're on a first name basis, and you're just like, so when they were on Howard, or they did Howard, or Howard did this, like, and it's not just you, like everybody does that. It's that persona that he created for himself, that when you refer to the Howard Stern show, at least in a somewhat familiar way, it just becomes not the Howard Stern show, but just Howard, or like, and I don't think it's a conscious choice. It's just something people do.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's just Howard. And if I were to say like Baba Booey, everybody would know what I'm talking about. Baba Booey. See, we need to have sound effects on this show, like they do on Howard. We just need to emulate it, just to piss off Howard.
I mean, I'll be honest. I haven't listened to Howard Stern in years, but I have nothing against him. I used to be a fan.
He has the best interviews ever. Like the stuff that he could bring out of people. I have to say this: if anybody wants to hear, I'm going to say something sacrilegious here. I am not a huge fan of. Oh God, now I'm forgetting Bill Murray. I'm not a huge Bill Murray fan, and. I think one of the reasons why I'm not a huge Bill Murray fan is the way that he treated people around him. Particularly, I'm thinking of the director of Groundhog Day, Harold Ramis. I didn't like the fact that they had a falling out, and I could not even imagine like him having a falling out with Harold Ramis. But that interview is so engrossing because they talk about like polio, like him growing up like in a house where people had polio, and his sister having polio, still having polio, the way his father was. It was just like it was so entrancing, because then you just know like, wow, that's what makes Bill Murray tick. And like that interview by itself like made me like convinced me like Howard is somebody that I want to listen to, because he brings out something in people that I may not even like, I'm not going to go out of my way and say like, oh, Bill Murray is on the radio, I'm going to have to listen to him. But the, Bill Murray on Howard, I'm going to listen to, because I know that Howard's going to bring something out of people. And he does that in his interviews, and it's just so crazy to listen to his interviews. He's the best interviewer ever. I will say that. Ever. I don't think anybody can beat him, not even Barbara Walters. He is the best interviewer ever. Like, and I don't know how much you listen to like Bill Maher or anything. Like Bill Maher is going through a thing now where he's trying to get Barack Obama on his show, and he's made a big deal about it. Like he even had this petition out there and stuff like that. Like, he's really butthurt that he's on other shows, and like he went on Ellen. President went on Ellen, and Bill Maher took that like personal, it sounds like. But the thing is I would listen to Barack Obama talking to Howard over Barack Obama talking to Bill Maher, because to me like that would just be like Bill Maher just like talking to himself. But like I think Howard would just bring something out of the president that is like, you're just like, wow, I learned something new about this guy. I'll say that.
Was Barack ever on the Howard Stern show, even when he was running like in 2008 or anything, or no?
I don't believe so. I don't think so. Yeah. And no, he hasn't been on Howard. I just looked it up.
Okay.
He should be. I mean, I'd like to think that, like, after presidents, like, get out of the office, I mean, there's nothing really they can do. Well,
Right.
Taft was Taft was a Supreme Court justice after he was president. So I mean, you can still do that. Like, there's still stuff for you to do. But like nowadays, you just don't have a job after you're president. Like that's it. Like your job being president is being ex-president. That's your job.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so,
you read a book.
yeah, pretty much. Or like you paint, like, George Bush. Like that's what you do. Like when it came out that George Bush paints, like I just wasn't surprised. I was like, well, what else is he gonna do? And that has nothing to do about him. It's just like there's nothing else you could do. Like, good for him. But like if I was president and like retired after my presidency, I would just like live out of my bathtub. Like I would just be in the bathtub all the time. Like I'd have like this tray that would go over, and I would just like dictate my memoirs like in the bathtub. Like that's like, what else am I gonna do? So I hope he goes on Howard Stern now. The Howard Stern show.
Well, if you're Taft and after your presidency you don't want to get in a bathtub because you'll just get stuck.
That's true. You can't get in the bathtub. Getting in a bathtub, bad idea if you're Taft. Oh God, where were we? Oh yes.
Well,
what else? Oh, that was a good one, by the way. I'm glad you brought up
thank
that
you.
stuff. I have the downer again, the bummer stuff. But it's my Geek Chic Part 4. I need to have a sound effect for this. I don't know what the sound effect is going to be. It's going to be like a wonk wonk or something like that. I don't know. So my Geek Chic is, it's vogue to hate things. And the thing that I'm thinking about most, and I didn't bring this up in the news because I wanted it for my Geek Chic talk, is it seems that people enjoy just saying something's gonna suck. And this new series, I think, instead of being positive, instead of trying to be uplifting about the state of Trek, and I think back to 2008 and 2009. Like, I was excited about Star Trek 2009. I remember I was very excited about it because I wanted something. It was something finally. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, this is gonna suck. They're not gonna do a good job about it. And I wasn't even thinking about like, look at every single movie that's come out like in this year. It's just been garbage, and this Trek movie is gonna be garbage because all movies now are garbage, and it's not a Marvel movie, so it sucks. Well, that totally wasn't the case. Like, it was fine. I mean, it was good. It was all right. It wasn't bad. It wasn't the greatest. But the point is it didn't have the level of like fear that this new series has. And I posted up an article in our notes, and I should post this up on the website as well. And this is an article from a girl, from a writer from IO9. And the article is the most like pointless. The title of it is "I'm terrified by the new Star Trek series." So it's just like right off the bat, like she has to be negative about it. She has to be really, really negative about it. And you don't really get to the point of like what she's trying to say until the very last paragraph. And let me read this to you. She said, and in the paragraph before, she says, "This new series has Brian Fuller and Nicholas Meyer on board, which is everything I could ever want. So of course, and this is interesting that she says this. So of course, it must be a horrible prank pulled on fans by the universe." So what she's saying is, you're gonna have Brian Fuller, Nicholas Meyer, and somehow this thing is probably not gonna be good. That's what she's saying. And what she says in this last paragraph is. I want Fuller's Star Trek to be everything that Star Trek has been missing for years. I want it to look good, while also being innovative, interesting. I believe that, if anyone is capable of it, Fuller is. I also believe that if he succeeds, my heart won't be able to take it, and I will die of shock as the bedrock foundation of my world. Star Trek is the best, and it always hurts me. Cracks. So it's like she won't give it a chance. It's like she wants it to be really, really good. And I should mention who this is. This is Catherine Trendacosta. Okay, so she wants it to be really, really good, and she's like, yeah, like Fuller's the guy. If anybody's going to be able to do it, Fuller's going to be the dude that's going to be able to do it. And now with Nicholas Meyer on board, it's just like adds to the effect of like it being good. But then it's like, don't be surprised if it sucks. And it's just like, why be so negative about it? Like, why be so negative? Why are you going to set yourself up to be sad? Because honestly, like right now, I don't care if anything's new in it. I don't care when the time play. The thing is Trek hasn't been on TV for a really long time. And, we could argue over the fact of, is it TV or not? By definition, streaming. But we haven't had anything new Trek-wise for so long that I don't care really, when it takes place or what, new ideas or what. I'm just so glad that two people that I really like are working on it. But as an added bonus, and the bigger bonus, is that it's a new Trek series. And, everyone being negative already, I think it's way too early to be negative. I think the time to be negative, and I mean, look at the episodes that we've reviewed already. I have, a personal feeling that, like, the first time that you could be negative is by, like, the 6th or 7th episode of a series. Then you can be negative. So, like, everybody out there, just stop being negative. And it's somehow geek chic to be negative. Like, but it's true. It's like it's vogue to say, oh, wow, that really stinks. And maybe that's because, like, a lot of stuff does. Maybe that's just because it really does, and a lot of people just fall into that program. But I don't think about this in particular. It's quite so appropriate to be so negative about it.
I agree with you, and I don't think it's I don't know anything about this lady, but I think it kind of falls into that hipster territory of, I liked Star Trek before it was cool. And so as it becomes more popular, it's like, well, this isn't the Star Trek I like. Like, this isn't this. And plenty of people like the Abrams movies, but, how many of those people know anything about Star Trek other than the Abrams movies? Which is fine. I accept that. I understand that they like that, and I understand why they like it. But I also understand, or I should ask that everybody else understand why I don't like those movies. Those movies are not Star Trek to me. I'm going to go see Beyond. I'm probably going to buy Beyond on Blu-ray when it comes out, or DVD or whatever. It's going to happen. I understand it's going to happen. I'm just going to buy into it no matter what happens. The franchise has not failed me so much yet that I've just written it off. The closest it ever came was Enterprise. And because I lived through Enterprise, I don't think it's ever going to, at least not anytime soon, put me personally through that of where I don't like it so much that I almost completely write it off. Because, and even with Enterprise, I wouldn't have completely written off Star Trek. I just wrote off Enterprise for a large number of years and just said, I like the Star Trek that I like, and there's other Star Trek, and Enterprise basically killed the franchise, or almost killed it. And, it's fine. And this lady, one of the things that I wanted to say about this article, because I read it right before the show too, is and this, I'm quoting right here, I am absolutely terrified that it cannot live up to my expectations. And I'm even more terrified it's going to be successful while failing to provide the thought-provoking storytelling that I expect from Star Trek. So right there within those two sentences, she's afraid that it's not going to be something that she likes, or that it's not going to be as good as she thinks it is. And that if it is good and it is successful and it's a hit show, or at least a succeeding show, that it's just of Trek, and that's also a fail. I'll give Abrams his due in saying that he revived a franchise that, by all means, in my opinion, living through it, I thought Star Trek was dead. I completely thought Star Trek was dead for a couple of years. He brought it back. He gave him a chance. He made Star Trek more successful. More people saw that movie. More people paid to see that movie than any other Star Trek movie ever. So that's a hit. That's what Hollywood wants. That's what some films are supposed to be. That's what blockbuster films are supposed to be anyway. Epic films are supposed to be. They're supposed to be so successful that everybody goes sees them. That's why Marvel's so big now, because everybody loves those movies and goes and sees them. But it's just, I don't want it to fail, and I want it to be what I want. And I know at the same time there's the reality in my head that it's probably never going to be the original series. It's probably never going to be Next Generation. It's just not going to live up to that. And it's not going to live up to that because I saw those shows when I was young. I watched those shows before I was in middle school, when I was in middle school, when I was in high school. They influenced me. They built me. They were very much a part of my childhood. And being an adult now in my 30s, a new show is not going to come out and completely change the way I think about things. It's just not. I know it's not. I mean, if it does, then it's the greatest show ever. But it's not going to do that. I know it's not going to do that. I'm hoping for a show that I really enjoy. And I'm optimistic about it, because after what J.J. Abrams has done as a Star Trek fan, and this girl seems like she's a Star Trek fan, after what the Abrams universe has put all of us Star Trek fans through, and Enterprise has put all of us Star Trek fans through, it's a breath of fresh air to hear that somebody that or two people now that worked on Star Trek that we all liked and we all agree on now that is good are coming together to build something new. So why would you be anything but optimistic about it, unless you just want to be a negative Nancy, basically?
Yeah.
That's my rant on your rant.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. Wow. Yeah, so that's my verdict. Well, you got any other stuff, man?
I don't. I like that one. Those were good verdicts. And I just as a side note, this whole verdict track kind of spawned through an idea of mine of it is fun to talk crap about things, because there's plenty to talk crap about Star Trek. And I remember this idea spawned honestly from a few years ago of me going away from Next Generation for a little while, and then coming back to it and watching some random episodes and going, man, this is really corny. and kind of not having rose-colored glasses on it, going, this is kind of a rough show in spots. And making me think that there's a lot of crap that you can talk about Star Trek. And as much fun as it is to hate on something, we should have a balance. And that's why every week Chris and I do a verdict trek and we switch off. So one of us isn't just always negative and one of us isn't always positive, and it's not a defend it kind of segment. It's a balance, because there's plenty of corniness, plenty of stupid out there. And I mean, we expanded into the real world, obviously, too, as we're talking about other people right now. But it just, I mean, we could easily have a verdict, a Star Trek verdict on Sub Rosa or something like that that's negative. It's, low hanging fruit. But I mean, it's fun to hate on stuff, but I mean, at least give it a chance. We don't know what this new Trek is going to be, and at least in my opinion, and it sounds like in Chris's opinion, it's going to be good for right now.
Yeah, that it is.
So that's everything I have to say.
It's only going to get better from here. All right, let's get to Talk Trek, because we have a great episode today.
Warp drive isn't going to do us much good with this knife stuck in our belly.
His brain is gone.
Worf, you're a romantic.
Oh man, is Janeway gonna help some terrorists? That's always crazy, because, do you ever think about this episode when you watched it? Like, this planet has, like, no people on it other than, like, this terrorist organization. That's, like, not even a terrorist organization, because what they're doing is just, like, yeah, like, that power plant shouldn't have that. Like, what the heck? What the heck, people? And you're like with the people that like are bad but are actually good, but then the people that should be good because you're with the bad people are like really bad, and they're dressed differently bad, like they're like obviously bad. But I always liked that about this episode, and of course the the weird episode and weird introduction I just gave is for Star Trek Voyager's Time and Again, which is a really, really fun episode. I think it's a fun episode. What do you think about it?
Without giving too much of my opinion away, I think it's a okay Voyager episode. I don't. There's not a whole lot that I dislike about it, but I don't think there's anything that's spectacular about it.
Nothing spectacular. Well, here's the thing. Really, only one little nugget comes out of this whole thing. I have to admit, it does something that it happens in not just Star Trek, but it happens in a lot of stuff that I don't really like. And that's where it's like you've gone through this whole episode, and then it practically starts over. In the sense that like everything that happened doesn't matter because it won't happen. And to spoil the ending, it's like they're passing by the planet again after all this stuff that we're going to talk about happens. And, like, Kes, warns them against going there, and is just like, hey, can I get a picture? Can I look at the view screen of this? And so, like, the only thing that really happens in the actual universe is really, like, the ending, if that makes any sense. Like, the first few seconds of the beginning, like, of Paris talking to Kim about the Delaney sisters, and the very end nugget where Kes comes in and, after Neelix is like, I don't know anything about anything. And then, she's like, don't go to that planet, blah, blah, blah. And so, like, really the only thing that you get out of this entire episode is that Kes might have a little bit of powers. Some interesting powers. Some good powers.
That's the only real character insight that you get out of this, I believe.
Pretty much. Janeway, I think, like, if anything was wasted, I think it was Janeway, really. Paris was alright in this episode. I do like that little kid, and I think, like, him teamed up with that little kid was pretty cool. I didn't like when Paris took a bullet for the kid, because I thought that was played the most cheesy way possible. Because the whole thing is the kid doesn't know, like, if he should trust Janeway and Paris. And then, like, the dude's like, you saved my life! And it's like, oh my god, really? You guys went, like, that's kind of lowering your standards right there. It was very cheesy. But it was a total Voyager ending, to be honest with you. So I guess that's why I'm not going to say I give it a pass, but I liked it because it's a total Voyager ending to have, like, something where what it is they're trying to do a rescue mission. We're going to go back and talk about everything because it's actually a more complicated episode than what I'm making it out to be just in this, like, overview. But it is a very Voyager ending where, they're trying to rescue Paris and Janeway. But, like, inadvertently causing the catastrophe. So the whole time you're led to believe that these people that they're teamed up with, that find them, they're the ones that caused the extinction of, the destruction of their planet, when it really was Voyager. And that's a total Voyager thing to do.
I thought by it's a Voyager ending, you meant that we went an entire episode and nothing happened.
See, now that's just rude. See, now I won't say that because no. Here's the thing. Like, here's where I.
But Voyager, Voyager does that because
I am not going to say that. I will never say that. You know what? Mark my words right here. I will never say that because we do get an important thing about Kes's powers right here, and this is a reoccurring thing because later on in season 3 it comes back in before and after, and Kes does the exact same thing. So it's like. It foreshadows Kes's powers and her ability to see Voyager in the greater scale. Plus, I could really nitpick. So, if you want me to nitpick, because it also says something about Neelix's character. Because the thing about Neelix's character is right off the bat, I mean, we're already like in the 3rd episode. It should be like bells going off. Neelix is full of crap from the very first episode. He's not been pretty much anywhere, like, and he was a traitor. It was like he was pretty much, that's like a dude that lived his entire life in a junkyard and then told you that like he toured Europe for like all of his life. Like, it was like that. Like, no, Neelix, you didn't. So, there's vignettes that you can get out of it, but I will never ever admit that like Voyager episodes have something where like nothing happens, because that is just, I think that's crap. I think that's that's kind of low to do that.
Okay, fair enough. But just so you know, I am referencing that the idea that the beginning, the entire what transpires through the main plot of this episode ultimately does not happen because they reset it and just go back to the beginning of the episode and go, oh wait, well, no, we didn't actually do that because we secretly fixed it.
That's true. That's
and
absolutely
you can
true.
argue that like Year of Hell is the same thing. There's a 2-parter epic episode where at the end of it just resets. You go, well, yeah, that never happened because we fixed it. So.
Oh, yeah, all right, yes. And I did say that at the beginning. I said it myself. But, so we get like what? We get like a 3-minute episode then, if you had to say.
I know where you're going with it, and I see what you're saying, and you're right. There are important aspects to take out of it, but the main plot event basically gets erased. Yeah.
Pretty much, it does. But take it for what it is. I mean, once again, it's Voyager. Take it for what it is. Because there's some great dynamics that are starting to expose itself between Tuvok and Chakotay. I mean, the characterization in this episode is really spot on. The only characterization that I thought was a little bizarre was the Doctor, because he has a line of dialogue in there, like a scene that I totally thought should have been like in the 2nd episode. It was like, why are you saying all this now? Because it was like, it was something to the effect of, I'm trying to remember out the top of my head, like something that the chief medical officer would have informed the people of, like, but he's the chief medical officer now. So, like,
right.
He should have informed them. And he's like, oh, and then he has to remind himself, oh, of course, there's no chief medical officer. And then he says a line like, don't forget to turn me off or something like that. And it's just a little thing that happens that I was just like, well, that should have happened in the 2nd episode first.
Yeah, sure. He should have probably been aware of the Maquis at least, and probably Neelix and Kes as well.
Yeah, because they have different anatomy. I should have been aware.
Yeah.
But let's dive right in, shall we? So this episode starts in the most, mundane way possible, and we actually finally do get to see the Delaney sisters. But this is it was a fun little thing to start off with, banter wise between Kim and Paris. But I always liked when they did that kind of stuff, because it was like Kim was always like, oh, I have a girl back home, and it served so well for a later episode that everybody hates, where he wakes up and it's like the whole Voyager. Okay, now I know how this is going to sound. Like he wakes up in bed and the whole Voyager thing like didn't happen. And he's like waking up next to that girl that he's talking about in this episode. So like if you didn't see this episode, you'd be like, oh, he's just waking up to a random girl. But like in this episode, he talks about that girl.
Right. And I know what episode you're referencing, and that's not a good episode, but just to comment on the Delaney sisters too. I remember when I started my rewatch of Voyager was not too long before we started actually recording the show, and I text Chris and I was just like, do you ever actually see the Delaney sisters? Because they get mentioned a fair amount in season 1, but never actually seen.
Yeah,
and,
I think you see them once, but it's in Captain Proton.
Yes, yeah, that is actually, I think, where you see them.
And that's it. And it's only one episode. Yeah, the Delaney twins. Well, they probably couldn't find twins, or maybe I don't know, something weird. I'm sure.
Yeah, who knows? It's a weird little
hang up. But I have to say, like, right after that banter thing happens, like Janeway comes out of. I gotta go back and watch it again because I know the second time, and I think the second time when they filmed it, like they filmed it 2 different times. The ending, because they mirror it. To Janeway coming out of her ready room, but she comes out with the most ridiculous look, like Tuvok, or not Tuvok, like Neelix just told her like the most dirty joke possible in there, and like she comes out laughing, and it's just like, what was told in there? And then there's like a planet that shows up on their sensors, typical Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. No.
But yeah. So anyway, I had to mention that because do you remember her? Do you remember her face?
I don't. Like, I actually don't remember what you're talking about. I didn't notice it.
Yeah, look at her face. And if it's not on the first one, it's definitely on the second one. Look on the second one when she comes out of her ready room, because she looks ridiculous, and it's just like, what was told in there? Like, you just imagine like Tuvok like pull my finger and then he farts or something. But yeah, and Neelix is so weird in the beginning too, because like he's leaning against that console, but I really love the look that Tuvok gives him when, like, as I was explaining, because they get a signal from planet, and like he's like, I don't know anything about anything, and then like Tuvok's look at him is just kind of like, oh my god, you suck. And I love that look. The look is just hilarious as hell. So I'm trying to get to the real philosophical part, because the meat and potatoes of the thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, in order to get that, you got to kind of explain the plot. Like, so the overarching plot with character development and little side notes all put off to the side. Basically, they find a planet that's been destroyed, a civilization that's been completely destroyed because of some sort of weird. I think it's something to do with like I don't remember it. It is a form of technobabble, and I don't remember the exact term. But basically, it looks like the civilization blew themselves up. So they're exploring it, and somehow Janeway and Tom get transported into the civilization, and they come to the realization that they're about a day off from when the explosion happens.
Oh, they have a really weird time thing too, which bothered me because like they don't tell time like Sean said, like a day off, and it is like a day off, but it's like certain like blah 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 rotation blah blah click click blah blah rotation.
Yeah, and that's
weird.
Side note, I forget exactly how long Tom says, because Tom does the math and says like I think we're like 20 some hours off from where they explode, but their revolutions are. Because I think the first number in their clocks are like revolutions, but I don't understand the revolutions because it's like 371 to 401. So the revolutions, like I guess it goes around 30 times, and that equals a day. I don't want to even try to like think about it. It just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. And before that, Kes comes on the bridge when they're looking at this planet. And it's like, Kes, what are you doing here? and that's kind of a real hint. So, like, if you cut it at that moment where Kes shows up, and then just splice it on the very last scene, like, that's the episode that actually does take place. True, I'm serious. It's true. But yeah, so Janeway and Paris now are in the weirdest planet ever. And I made a note of this in there. I don't know who the costume designer was, but these were the most... It was the corset planet. Like, everybody's wearing a corset, and it's like, what the hell are you wearing? These were the worst. These are the worst costumes so far in the series.
My! So it's so weird because, like, one of the first people they encounter is some sort of policeman, like a beat cop almost, some sort of guard, and he's in a brown weird tunic with like earmuffs almost, and an emblem on his chest, and the emblem looks like an ice cream cone if the ice cream were fire. So it's like a cone, like an ice cream cone with like fire, like a little flame coming out of it.
It's exactly. Yeah, it's just weird costuming. So I don't know.
Yeah, and everything's colored weird. They wear that weird orange, and they all wear the same color. It's that weird orangish yellow, and like gray.
Yeah, but they're not a militaristic society. Like, they never established that. But it's like as though they're all wearing a uniform. But they're not wearing a uniform. It's just like regular clothes. Because Janeway and you know... Oh, and they have to buy clothes, too, which is hilarious. Like, because then their clothes are, like, hanging up in the shop that they just exchanged
the uniforms. Yeah, the Starfleet uniforms.
Yeah, and
go
these
on
people are, like, gawking at it. Like, what the hell is that? And it's like, no, what the hell are you wearing?
Yeah, I mean, I have a huge problem with the Voyager style uniform, Starfleet uniforms, but it's nothing compared to what these people are wearing on the planet.
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Really, 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 really bad. So there's a kid. Well, they lie, of course, you know, because they have to lie and follow the Prime Directive. This is a Prime Directive episode, or it tries to be a Prime Directive episode, because it brings up the Prime Directive quite a bit.
Yeah, it gives it up pretty quick, though,
but
too.
Paris kind of just, like, says, you know, screw the Prime Directive and, you know, lets it out of the bag. But I love that kid actor. I thought he was fantastic. Because he kind of gives them away and is like, you know, these guys didn't come on a transport. And then Paris is like, we're going to eat you. It's like, Jesus Christ. And Janeway's reaction to that is hilarious because it's just like, what the hell are you doing? Because he totally just does it on his own. He's like, we didn't. We lied. We're going to eat you now. And it was just like, oh my God. Because they had a kid. That was the thing. Like, Janeway tries to say, like, oh, we were that couple that showed up that had a kid. And the kid's like, well, where's your kid? And, you know, we ate the kid. Now we're going to eat you. It's like, Jesus criminy. And that's pretty much how they're given away.
Pretty much.
They'll fall in the hands of the good guy, bad guy / terrorist who's not terrorist.
Yeah, ultimately, so at one point, about halfway through, Janeway realizes that they caused the explosion, and I don't know how she comes to this conclusion, but she comes to the conclusion that
it's not till way later, though. It's not till way later. That's like the very end. In fact, that's like when they're opening up that portal.
But that's why she decides to break the Prime Directive, though, right, and tell them the truth that they're from Voyager and from a starship.
Yeah.
When she tells the truth, that's like about halfway through. She in her head thinks that they already broke the Prime Directive and somehow caused the explosion because she tries to explain it to Tom.
Well, just by them being there, I mean, what she thinks, because they're going off to that power plant and going along with it, and she assumes that whatever events, happened, were precipitated by them already being there. So they've already changed the timeline, no matter what.
Right.
So they have nothing to lose if they say who they are or not.
Going off of that, do you find it a little odd that this episode is right after Parallax, and so we have two Voyager episodes that happen to be episode 2 and 3 back to back, very early on in the show, obviously, that deal with the idea of cause and effect, and basically the effect is due, or the cause is due to the effect rather than the cause making the effect, if that makes sense.
No, not really, because this falls in the pattern of Star Trek Voyager being a, science fiction-y kind of show, and I think cause and effect is definitely a science fiction-y kind of thing. I don't see any. I know it's kind of weird having like the same kind of theme be one episode after another. I think that's a bit much, but not so much in what they're trying to accomplish. And what I mean by that, like Parallax was an episode that was trying to accomplish, let's get Torres to be the chief engineer. That's what that episode was trying to accomplish. What this episode's trying to accomplish is that Voyager is an anomaly in everything, not just physically being an anomaly, but it's just a time out of joint type of thing, where it's an object that shouldn't really be there. And now this adds a certain depth, a certain level to Janeway's character, in the sense that even in this instance, a small instance that, as we said, doesn't really matter in the long run because it doesn't actually happen. They actually end up changing it. So it doesn't really impact very much. But on a certain level, it brings across the fact that Janeway has placed Voyager in a place, in a time and place that it shouldn't have been placed. Not just this episode, not just, all throughout. Just right now, like, she has to realize that just by Voyager's mere appearance around this planet, going through this space, this territory that it's in, that it's changing the fabric of time-space. So I think that adds a really big level. So I think the two episodes have a different kind of objective to try to get across. One, characterization, the other one, a bigger scope of what they're trying to say of how Voyager's changing things, especially in the Delta Quadrant.
Oh, that's great. I love the way that you said that, and I see what you're saying, and that's great, and that's probably a lot deeper than I actually really considered. I was just thinking these early episodes being similar in their temporal mechanic kind of sci-fi issues. It's always going to be better than, say, episode 2 they all got drunk, and then episode 3 they all got racist.
Exactly. It adds a different level to Voyager, I think, than from. I know you're referencing TNG, but
Right.
A certain type of boldness, even that they're going to go that far and do that, I think, is makes the show magical. That they're willing to take that leap and chances. Even if it makes you say at the end, yeah, that was kind of a waste of an episode. The fact that they're trying this, I think, says a lot more about the series than any other series, because they really don't do this in any other series. This kind of, let's do this, time warp kind of thing, time jump, and then have the twist of, Voyager could be a destructive force. We could be a destructive force. I think that's an interesting theme.
I do too. I agree with that. When you look at it like that, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
And honestly, watching it episode to episode, watching Parallax 2 time and again, I didn't really get that impression. It was just kind of like looking at it analytically. There's a very similar Tom Paris conversation in both of them, where he gets confused about timelines. That just drew my attention to it, where it's like, you guys kind of, you didn't write the same episode, but you're using like almost the same mechanic in both of them. However, in Parallax, ultimately, Parallax, you can't say that they erased the entire episode at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a writer. I think that's a writer's tool also, where you have to have somebody. If you're dealing with this on a certain level, this could look so complex that you need to have somebody that's like, say what? What do you mean by that? And then you use that to like drive the conversation where they work out like what's going on. And I think Paris just so happened to be the person in both the episodes to do that for the writer.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, too, like, Paris is not a scientist. And so, like, I could really respect how, like, especially on Voyager, they try to keep people where they are. Like, you're not going to see Paris as, like, commanding a starship and stuff. The thing is they're really driving home really early that Janeway is a scientist.
Yes.
And, she's really smart in temporal mechanics and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, one of my only hang-ups of this episode, to be honest with you, I really love this episode. I mean, I just love Voyager anyway, so that's just take it for what it is. The only thing that I have a hang-up with, and it's because they keep calling it the Prime Directive in this episode, but in later episodes, they have something called the Temporal Prime Directive. So they don't explain very clearly, I guess, like in later episodes, like what the Temporal Prime Directive is versus the Prime Directive, or that if the Temporal Prime Directive is a subset of the Prime Directive, because in that regard, I don't know what would be applicable if there were two different Prime Directives, if there'd be a Temporal Prime Directive more applicable here, or just, your regular run-of-the-mill Prime Directive. The fact that they decide to beam down to the planet, well, the thing is the civilization's dead. So, I don't think there's any, like, thing to be like, oh my god, there could be consequences if we go down to this planet. So, given that fact, I would take the fact that the Temporal Prime Directive would be more in play than the regular just Prime Directive. But my point is later on in the series, they talk about two different Prime Directives. But that's a really big hang-up I have on this episode.
I could see that. That makes sense to me. And I don't hear, or I at least haven't heard a lot about the Temporal Prime Directive yet in Voyager, but maybe it's a subset or like a side like paragraph of the normal Prime Directive. I don't know.
Yeah, because you remember the Temporal Agency, like that.
In DS9.
Yeah, they have to investigate Cisco and everything they did. So there is like an organization that deals with time stuff.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Going back to a point that you made early on in that, though, with Voyager Voyager and the crew and the people kind of keeping their places, and you see very early on that Janeway's a scientist, and that's really what she leans towards, and knows these things about temporal mechanics and these anomalies like in parallax that she knows a lot about. In Voyager, you get a lot more of Janeway's history even early on than you get of the other captains, because I can't hardly tell you what Kirk did before he commanded the Enterprise.
Yeah, and in fact, even in the it's kind of interesting that you bring that up, because one of my favorite episodes of TOS, that the name completely escapes me, is I think it's Court Martial is actually what it's called, but it's where he gets court-martialed. And yes, they're listing like all of Kirk's medals and stuff.
Right.
And it's just like these gallant, like he was a gallant man. But they never go into the details of like, that's like the most you get of Kirk's past. Like,
right,
that dude was like a war hero or something,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get like the Conscience of the King, where it talks about how they knew, and I can't remember the character's name, the dictator that killed so many people, and Kirk was one of the people that knew him too, but thought that he was dead. And there's another episode where you learn about Kirk's brother, and that might even be Conscience of the King, actually, where you learn about Kirk's brother, because he only gets mentioned like once.
That's right. Yeah.
But I mean, you know nothing about these people's history, Kirk and Picard too. I feel like Picard's very cloudy as far as his history. in the TV show. Maybe not so much as Kirk, but definitely way more than Janeway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in every episode, practically, you get like a small vignette of what she is, and even through Tuvok, you even get a lot about her. She talks a lot.
Right.
He talks a lot about her previous commands, and her character, how she was before, and by character I mean like character of person.
Right.
Yeah, I like that a lot. But I also like and in this episode too, I like how they start to, and I've mentioned this a little bit before, but I really like how they include people or choose to include people to work on certain things in the episode. Like, okay, it's not, you don't have that like strong B or C story. Like, the people that are not Paris and not Janeway are working on how to get Janeway and Paris back. And you have like Janeway, that leaves Janeway and Paris to focus on their own thing. So like if there was a B story, it would be with Chakotay and what they're doing, but it's not so overbearing that you're just like, why are we focusing on this? More so than like, why are we not focusing enough on Janeway and Paris? And I that balance is just struck so beautifully in this episode and done so well.
Yeah, it's not so all over the place like these DS9 episodes that we've talked about, where there's 5 different plots going on, all in different directions. They all kind of converge on their own. And you're absolutely right, because that ground crew team is Chakotay, B'Elanna, Tuvok, and Ensign Kim all together. So the only kind of sides that you get that aren't really there are the Doctor and Neelix in this episode.
Yeah, and the way they
don't really
that.
have,
oh, sorry,
yeah. Oh, I was going to say, and they don't really have their own plots other than like they have a scene basically where they kind of get to talk a little bit and do their little spiel, and then that's it for them.
Yeah, and it's just because of what Kes went through on the bridge. So like the stories still sync up. It's not so disjointed. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
So and this group that they fall in line with is really interesting to me, because I don't think they intended it to be this way, the writers, but like I do like how you think for a second in your head that what these people did or are planning on doing, that they're the ones that caused the destruction of their planet, and that they're the kind of like terrorist kind of people. But I like the fact that like what they're doing is not terrorism. It's like mundane. Like they just want to steal this like power source or shut down this power source at like a power plant. And I really like that it's not like, let's go find a nuclear bomb. I don't know why I really like that. I guess because it's just it's out of the box, and I guess that's like something that you would expect. Like you wouldn't expect like a power plant to like have the capability to kill your entire species off, but I think that was an interesting way to go, and so it wasn't so cheesy to me.
Right. I want to add just as a kind of a side note here too. When they are having their little rally demonstration riot outside of the power plant, that struck me a little bit as it's not nearly as bad, but it was like a Man Alone, where there's not enough people there. Like it just suffers from the syndicated TV show where you just didn't get enough people to have a proper mob. You just have like maybe 20 people, maybe kind of fighting with each other. So the effect of a riot is kind of not really effective there. It's not as bad as a Man Alone because you don't hear people in the background saying random stuff. But I tried to pick it out too. I watched that scene like a bunch of times in a row just to try to see if I could find somebody like in the background saying something where like in a Man Alone. But It wasn't nearly as obvious.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Oh, nothing beats that mob. I love that mob. You heard her.
But yeah, no, it was a bit small. It's one of those things where if they had a movie of this episode were a little bit longer and it was like an actual movie, that crowd would have been 5 times as many people probably.
Yeah. No, I totally got that. I thought that about the sets too, because it's like the building that they're initially in, the time, because they're like walking to the power plant, and like to get to the power plant they're like on this grassy knoll. So like the grassy knoll is like in the middle, and so it's like they're like right next door. And it's just like,
yeah.
You just got to go like right around the corner and you're at the gate, and then you're already at the power plant. It's like, yeah, that just, and it just suffers from, like you were saying, just syndication, budget restrictions.
No.
But
it's funny how out of all the Star Trek series, out of all 5 of them, every time they go outside somewhere, when you can tell they're filming like on location, it always reeks of Southern California. Either reeks of Southern California or reeks of a set. It's one of those two whenever they're in the exterior.
Pretty much. So they confiscate all their stuff, but I'm going to play something that I actually really, really like. I like this scene a lot, and it's just a little tiny part with Paris talking to the little kid, and I just thought it was played very well, but I'll talk about why I like it after I play it.
But then one of them might be a weapon, and I wouldn't want you to show me how that works, would I?
Hey, kid. You were right about one thing. I was lying. I don't need children.
You don't scare me. My father works for the Media Bureau, and when I tell him all about this, he'll go
What is
right...
he, some kind of journalist?
Yes, and so am I.
Is that right?
I report for my school journal. That's right where everyone's going to find out about you when I write about this in next week's edition.
What's your name?
Latika.
Latika. I'm sorry.
For what?
I just am.
I realize how this must appear to you, but...
So I've always been a stickler for, like, I've always liked some of the most random stuff that you'll ever see in movies or television shows. Then you're just like, why do you like that, Chris? But there's several points to be made here. I really like how the actor, the kid actor, I really like how he plays it, where it's like, I know what you are, and then he's like, but, you know, then he's soft, and this is, you know, what I am, but, you know, I'm going to tell everybody about you when I get a chance. And then, you know, then he plays it soft. And I really like that. It, like, the variance in the character is, like, trying to explore Paris, like, trying to understand him, like, for what he's witnessing in front of him with the exchange between their weapons being taken, and, you know, the exchange between the head guy of the organization, the terrorist organization, and I should call them protesters, the protesters, and of Janeway, of what the kids, you know, it's two different things that he's having to deal with. He's having to deal with watching that, and the knowledge that Janeway might be a hostile force, because that's what they believe that she might be, and that she could be a tool for them. He's having to deal with that at the same time that he's having to deal with somebody who's opening up to him. And so I really like how the actor is able to convey that, just, you know, in his tone and his variance. I think that was very mature for an actor who looks like he's about 10. It was very impressive. It was very, very impressive. I also really like Paris right here because it had this kind of emotion where, you know, and this is after we had talked about Janeway coming to the realization that they might have caused this accident. But it was like Paris is on the same planet. he's in the same time frame, and he knows what happens to the civilization, and he's gonna die because he's right there with them. And in that moment of knowing what's going to happen to him, he looks towards the boy and he apologizes. And he doesn't say, the fact that he doesn't say what he apologizes for, even though we clearly know what he's apologizing for, speaks volumes over everything that Paris is trying to say in terms of, I really don't want this to happen to you, but it's going to happen to you regardless. It makes the future so much more inevitable, I think, by saying that, by saying sorry. I think it makes the future inevitable. But I love that scene. I really absolutely love that exchange.
It's nice. That's good. I this is another thing. I like our Voyager episodes because you always bring up stuff that I don't think about. You're far more insightful on the Voyager episodes than I give them credit for.
I definitely think Voyager is one of those things I thought a lot about. Like when I watch them, I want to think a lot about them because I know there's depth there, and there's just depth there to me that I think is underappreciated. And art by its own nature creates a different kind of catharsis for everybody. I mean, that's just obvious. If somebody looks at a Michelangelo is going to create a different emotion in somebody than if I look at the same exact piece. And so I really respect that. But at the same time, I think that it's important for people to validate their emotions. And so, like, every time when I've talked about, like, I really like Voyager, I don't want to be kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where that girl is, I don't want this show to suck. Like, I don't want to just say, I just like Voyager. Like, there's reasons, multiple reasons in multiple episodes over, vast expanses that make me like this show more than any other series, and why it's my favorite series. And that you should look for those things. And honestly, like, I expect that, just not of me, but like a lot of people, like when they say DS9, and this is pointed at, I do have to say, this is pointed at the DS9 people more so than anybody, more so than the Voyager people, because people say all the time how much they love Voyager. I mean, sorry, DS9. DS9 is one of the most beloved series, if not the most beloved series, and I think you could just say that. People really love DS9. But I've never listened to like a podcast or a commentary or something on such an intellectual level where I'm listening to it, where they're talking about DS9, where I just go, I understand. I may not look at that piece like I was saying, I might not look at that Michelangelo. I might not look at DS9 the same way, but I totally understand what you're saying now. And unfortunately, I have never heard anybody do that for me, where they've, explained a certain vignette, like, and in so doing, like, I can't even imagine. I validate my own point because I cannot even imagine saying, like, what moves me the same way when Paris puts his hand on that boy and says sorry is that crowd that goes, yeah, you heard her, get home. Like, like, seriously, like, I'm making a moot point, like, in that sense. Like, that's kind of apples and oranges, because you could pick other things in there. Like, in that episode, like, there's some good Odo stuff. Renee Bergeron does some really good stuff. But the point is that, I really want people, when they say that they like something like that, to, like, come out and have some good opinions of it. And, for me, it's not really, I want to sway somebody, to like Voyager or something like that, or that I feel that Voyager needs to be defended so much. It's just that it validates it so much for me. And even looking back at the series, like now even talking about this show, the episode and stuff like this, like that, it's just like, it validates it for myself that it's like, yeah, this is your favorite series. Like, and don't forget it. So I just have to say that.
Fair enough. Oh, well, I guess I'm kind of at a loss of words because I'm trying to think of like where I can get there, because like there's no way I'm going to get there in Next Generation, at least not for a long time into our show, because these early Next Gen episodes are pretty rough. I mean, the last Next Gen episode we did is like probably the worst episode of Star Trek that ever existed. And I mean, just objectively so. It's a really bad episode. It screeches of racism, and it's just not good on top of that. And so it's just putting something really bad and anti-Star Trek on top of a bad story, on top of corny effects, and you just get a whole crapshoot of an episode. And then the original series, we haven't quite got there. The one thing about the original series is we've got a lot of good episodes early on, so like those will come out, and so maybe, hopefully, there'll be these kind of conversations of me where there is that passion, where it's like, oh yeah, this is why I like it. It's a stupid little scene that you don't really think about, but when you actually kind of think about it and articulate it and watch it, it makes a whole lot of sense, and it just explodes the entire show open. However, I like the original series for slightly different reasons too. I'm kind of tinged on the look and the color and the feel of it, but we'll get there. And I don't want to get too off subject and talking about other Star Trek shows, because we're talking about Time and Again. And just as a side note, like I just wanted to say, like I appreciate like how maybe not forceful, but how willing you are to articulate your passion for Star Trek Voyager, even in what I would consider as a mediocre episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And like I call them, I love the word vignettes, because that's what they are. They're tiny little pieces that shine on the bigger whole, that you can respect in the grander image of what Voyager is. And so, like, if that's the only thing that you pick out of that episode, it still is in the Voyager universe, and it's still something to be able to pick out.
Voyager does do a very good job of creating an overarching storyline without having continuous actual plot lines throughout it. So DS9 and Enterprise both do this thing where they have these storylines that are constantly going throughout a season, and episodes touch on them heavy or light and somewhere in between, and it keeps going like that. Voyager is really way more subtle about that. Way more, and I'm sure eventually it became unintentional, but in the beginning I don't necessarily think it was that intentional, where they just have these little kind of things. Even like the Delaney sisters, like we were saying, like the Delaney sisters get mentioned a couple in this episode, and then they get mentioned again, and then you see them like once or twice, and they're constantly there. Same thing with like Seska. Seska's like one of the best examples. You see Seska very early on wearing blue, but then they're like, well, let's bring this character back. Let's bring this actress back. And they developed Seska, and then Seska just keeps popping in like all over the place throughout the show. I think she drops off after season 4 or 5, somewhere in there. But I mean, for about half of the show, she kind of is just a reoccurring character that just ends up around in different places. And I don't think originally it was intentional. I don't think when we saw Seska and Parallax that they knew that like that was going to be Seska, but that's what she became. And so they were really good about tying those knots and drawing those lines and connecting those dots, and any other analogy that I can use to do it. And so they're very smart about it, and I do appreciate that with Voyager, because it was very, very subtle.
Yeah, absolutely. And because Seska in particular, she disappears for a while. and dies, and then they bring her back in like the greatest fashion. They have that holodeck program, and it's like she's alive, but she's not really alive. But like to bring back the character that way is just like ingenious. I love that episode, and it's just like inventive ways to bring back characters. They do that with Cass too, to bring her back. But yeah, I like that it's not so episodic, and it's not so part 1, part 2, part 3. It's so fluid.
Yeah.
And to be so fluid is, I think, is great. I'm glad that it happened the way that it happened, because, it makes it unique. And, I agree with you. I don't think they intended it to start out that way, but the fact that it did happen that way, I think makes it unique for that series.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
But, well, and there's not much left, like, in the and we'll run through it fast, because I want to get to these philosophical questions, because I think they're more fantastic, actually, than the actual episode.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the episode brings them up, or makes you think about them. I think that's really important on a certain level. So, we've already discussed how at the same time that they're trying to hatch a plan to save Paris and Janeway. Excuse me. And it just so happens that what they're working on to try to get them back is eventually the thing that actually does the planet in the first time. So when they came across, that's what had happened. A cool scene that I do have to mention, and like this I thought was just pretty sweet. I really liked when they found their this happened really early in the episode though. Like I really like when they found the comm badges in the debris. That was really that was really cool. I thought that was like pretty sweet. But it gives it kind of like that spooky kind of nature. But
right.
So they go to the power plant with the people under the auspice that they're gonna take. What are they doing at the power plant? I forgot what that thing is, but try to steal something. And which may or may not be the device that causes the grand explosion stuff, because it's getting down to the countdown to the revolutions or whatever they talk about, the weird timekeeping thing. I'll just run through it real fast then. So they're like in this hallway, and like this like white thing starts expanding, which is presumably like a portal, I believe, is how they describe it, about where they can go. And they explain this all in a scene in the... Did we give a name to that room? Where the conference room? In the conference room.
No. Yeah.
In that conference room. So they explain everything. They explain this plan that they're following through with now. And, Tuvok gives like some logic like thing. Like, we shouldn't do this, but I have no other plan, so let's do this. Essentially. And Janeway realizes, like, that's when the cat's out of the bag, like, oh crap, we did this, and we're the cause. And she convinces them to give her phaser, which stops it, which is pretty cool, because I don't remember a single time when they talk about like the particles or something like that are emanating on the other side, which is essentially phaser fire. So they actually like technobabble like the phaser fire, which is pretty sweet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's actually Janeway in the other time. So like, Tuvok and all them and Chakotay, like they're in after the explosion and before the explosion. Janeway's in that other time. So from the other time, Janeway closes it with her phaser. They're able to sync up that way, so she's able to close it up. So that's pretty much the episode. There's not much there, but there is. I mean, there is a lot there. And I want to bring up this question that I had, and the way that I wrote it in the notes was, if chance brought you to the point of facing such a dilemma, is the answer intrinsically pointless? Was it inevitable that this planet was going to explode. And it's so interesting because that's not the action they take. The answer for them is, well, no, like, we have to do everything that we possibly can to stop this. And that's just so interesting to me, because I think if you know the outcome of something, maybe it's human nature or maybe it's just my nature, but if you know the outcome of something, I think it's just easier to just say, well, it is what it is, and become nihilistic about it, because you're not going to be able to change it, and just accept it for what it is. So what I'm saying is, since they knew that this explosion that was going to take place, that was going to destroy the planet, it's really great and fascinating that, like, in the Star Trek universe, they want to take the initiative because they have the ability to, through the scientific method, determine what the cause may or may not be of what's going to happen and try to change the course. They just don't, like, beam to the planet, or I shouldn't say just beam to the planet. They don't get into this different time period and then just say, like, oh, crap, we're going to die in, 20 hours. Hey, let's go have the time of our life. I think that's interesting.
Right. I agree. And that's a really interesting question. And to me, that point, or that question rather, brings up of the thing that I say often, or have said before on the show. That's the Star Trek. That's the Trek part of the episode. That's the lesson that you learn, the point that you're supposed to ultimately take away, where they're going to, no matter the cost to themselves, they're going to make sure that this society that they've encountered, this planet, this civilization, lives, because that would be the greater good. Whether they lose their lives or something happens to them or whatever may happen, the better thing is to preserve life in all of its forms. And to me, that's very Star Trek. And I think Janeway is exemplary in this episode of showing that kind of attitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Paris as well. There, I made fun earlier of the scene where Paris takes a bullet for the kid, but he really does. Uh-huh. But I think that shows on a level that Paris himself isn't willing to be nihilistic about the situation, because the kid could have easily just been shot, and Paris could have said, well, he's going to die tomorrow, or, die, like, I don't know what the countdown was from then, like maybe 10 minutes, like after the kid would be shot, like, well, the kid's going to die anyway in 10 minutes, so what does it matter? And what that would do was that would free him up, because he ends up getting shot and then saying, like, go on, like, leave me here, Janeway, and go try to save the planet. And Janeway has to continue on without him. So, like, that's one less person that she has to, like, work with to be able to, accomplish the task of saving the greater good. So, yeah, the kid probably would have died, but, to save the whole planet. So, I mean, his act of self-sacrifice, I mean, granted, he didn't die, but he took a bullet for him. That's an interesting choice, character choice. But, it just wasn't like a throwaway moment. And it just wasn't a moment just to be, like, heartfelt of, like, I connected to this kid on some level, and now, I'm going to take a bullet for him. It was like a conscious decision to say, the future, we're gonna succeed. And if I don't take a bullet for this kid, he's going to have a world that he's going to be able to, live into and wake up tomorrow. I'm not willing to accept defeat. And that's what the decision of taking the bullet is Paris on his own level saying, I'm not willing to take defeat. I loved that moment.
Yeah, I agree too. And it's just one of those things where they make the characters, Janeway and Paris in particular, so heroic without being I mean, take away he takes a bullet for the kid. I guess that's heroic no matter how you cut it. But you take Janeway, who's ultimately trying to escape and get away from these other people, and she realizes that her crew caused the explosion that destroys the planet, destroys this civilization. And rather than getting out herself and being able to escape, and ideally probably going through that portal that they create, and her being fine and leaving the civilization in ruin, she decides to destroy the portal and save the civilization, not knowing what's going to happen to herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I don't people don't act like that ideally, but in this Roddenberry world universe of humanity being better than we currently are, people do act like that. And this episode, in that regard, in my opinion, is very Roddenberry.
Oh, absolutely. It is Trekish.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I think, what was I going to say? I don't know. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I totally agree. Yeah, I just agree, man.
Yeah.
And, they do.
I think...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to bring up a little part of kind of, like, I had written it in the notes, but... and we'd kind of talked about it a little bit, but I think it's a little bit of a Star Trek trope at this point of doing something like that. And the only reason I think of it as being a Star Trek trope is because I think of the City on the Edge of Forever, where the climax is that you do not save Edith Keeler for the greater of humanity, even though you arguably that's the one person that you love, or that Kirk loves, and that's the woman for him, and that's the woman that he fell for, but he has to let her die and watch her die to make humanity go in the course that it's supposed to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you want to read your question? Because I want to talk about H.G. Wells a little bit.
Okay, so going on into that trope, and which will lead right into my question as I wrote it, is if you know the future, do you change the past to alter tragedy or unfortune?
Well, H.G.
Or misfortune, rather.
When
Sorry.
I read your question, the very first thing that popped in my head were the Morlocks. Mm-hmm. I think in reading... And the best answer to this question is no. You don't change the past. You change your future. Because the tragedy is unavoidable. And I think your question is far more philosophical than mine. But the first thing that I thought of when I read it was H.G. Wells' Time Machine. Because he has a time machine. He realizes through, the evolution, through different steps, that, you get through you get to the Morlocks. But what was interesting, and it kind of became a mulligan, because then, in the book the Morlocks end up stealing the time machine and stuff, so he can't really do this. But let's just say for a second that the time traveler still had the time machine. He never thought in his head to go back and try to find a way to prevent human evolution from creating the Morlocks. Instead, he thought of a way to make the tragedy of human evolution, or what they got to, better. You destroy the Morlocks in that given time period and move forward, and give the humans who are not the Morlocks the ability to move forward. And it's very easy. It would have been a lot easier for him just to have gone back in the past and was like, oh, this is where the humans start to de-evolve. I'm gonna shoot all the de-evolved humans right here and handle it that way. But I think it's always better, at least what Wellesian kind of sci-fi tells us is, yeah, you should change something, but you don't really change the past. You change the future. But the reason why I say that's like a really philosophical thing is, and it's take a greater mind than mine, because technically speaking, where Janeway is and where Paris is, they're in the past of this planet, and where the rest of the Voyager crew exist are in the future. But they're not changing the past; they're changing the future. So you don't really go to the you don't really change the past. You're just changing the future. That's all you're really changing. But I like your question regardless. I think it's really deep. I think it's really deep. But that's my answer.
It's very complicated, and that's. I mean, I knew we were going to have a hard time discussing this because it's just a hard question to grasp, because it deals with that weird alternate reality and an aspect of time travel. It's so hard to, I think, really talk about it. I think you did a good job of trying to explain it, and a better job than I certainly can.
So let me ask you a question, then, based off your question. What? Okay, because the premise that you have set forth is that you'd have to know the outcome, 100% of what's happening, in order for you to make the conscious decision to change the past, to alter the future. You'd have to know that outcome of what's happening. So, what would you say if Janeway and Paris showed up in the past, but they never figured out what caused the tragedy? Because she realizes, she does come to the conclusion of what caused, she does solve the Scooby-Doo mystery, which ends up saving the future of this planet.
At the moment of impact, yeah.
At the very moment.
Or near the moment, yeah.
But what if she never did? I mean, would that make the whole voyage of her trying, or the whole effort of her trying to alter the avoid the tragedy, would that make it really moot?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think so, because basically at that point you failed in what you set out to do, even if it were unintentional. When they realize that they're in the past and the explosion is going to happen, if she didn't realize that the portal that Chakotay is creating, Chakotay and friends are creating, if Janeway just doesn't realize then and there that it was her that caused it, or them rather, her crew that caused it, and just jumps through the portal and that entire civilization gets destroyed, then you would think also Tom Paris then somehow dies as well.
Yeah, because she's not with Tom.
Yeah, and then they live in a really weird, fractured present at that point, where basically she did not succeed. She completely failed in, whether her mission was known to her or not, she failed to realize what was going to actually fix the problem that they set out to fix. And now they live in this world where not only is the civilization dead, but one of her crew is also destroyed.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And
so, I mean, and this is where you can get really complicated, because they know of these chromaton particles. Do they try to go back to that impact point and the ground zero, as it were, and try to fall into one of those, what do they call them, like cracks or whatever they are?
Yeah.
To go again into the past, this time knowing what caused it. And would that help, or do they go far back enough, or do they actually get it? And this is why I'm going to drop back to, this is where the Star Trek is. That moment Janeway sees it happening, and rather than rescuing herself and knowing that she'll be okay, because she doesn't know that she's going to be back on, basically erase everything and be back on the bridge of Voyager. She decides to destroy the portal, which in her mind, in her character's mind, dooms her to the rest of her life on that planet. And so she makes this sacrifice that isn't death, but is a fate of being in an alien world with somewhat hostile company, since she is with hostile people there.
Yeah. I really like how you drew that back to the Star Trek. Well, I think that's important. I mean, it's not easy to do. Like, it's very hard to find decisions that characters make, like Janeway makes in that instance, that demonstrate that in a lot of other shows. Like,
right,
we've yet to see something where Archer's done that at all.
Right. Well, just like you're talking about how Paris takes the bullet for the kid, Paris, for all he knows, the kid's going to die the next day anyway, so why would he bother taking the bullet?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of story. He sacrifices himself for what he thinks is the he puts himself in harm's way for the better future, if you will.
Yeah. Of an alien race, even.
Right.
An alien
and this
race.
kid who's basically been a jerk to them the entire time that they've been on this planet.
Yeah, he's a little jerky. I like the kid, though. Kid's good.
Yeah, it's fine.
So so everything leads up to that, and then in classic, I don't know of any other way to do this, because she does disrupt their like little portal, but their reaction to it is so hilarious, because like they like fall back, like it's time to overact, and they're just like whoa, and I don't know if that's like a slow mo, and like the green filter comes on, it's just like, oh my god,
I was gonna say, there's that weird green explosion, right?
Yeah, like green explosion out of nowhere. And then it gets like all white, like we're in heaven now. Zoom to Voyager, and then everything's a-okay, and we're back at the very beginning of the episode. But I love how they did that. And it's strange that I'm like making fun of it and then saying at the same time I love how they did that, because when it focuses on Janeway walking in on the bridge again, but like you can overhear the conversation of the Delaney sisters in the corner. That is so cool. Yeah, it's like, it's not like, because at the beginning of the episode that like followed them, right? And
right.
Yeah, so like you caught the very end, at the end of the episode, the end of the Delaney sisters, and you just like hear like blah 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 Delaney sisters, and you're like, sweet, that was a nice way of doing that. And of course, then Tuvok, well, I don't know, or not Tuvok, Neelix, well, I don't know anything about anything. Whoa! And Kes runs on, and here's the big point, like at the very, very end, as I was saying, like Kes has a little bit of powers. She can sense things. And they don't decide to go to the planet, because the planet, Prime Directive, they're a pre-warp society, all that good stuff. And
right.
they continue on.
I mean,
but
it's almost like it was all just a dream. I mean, I understand, because we've been talking about it for a little while now. I know it's more complicated than that, but it's almost like it was all just a dream. And next thing you know, Bob Newhart is going to wake up next to Suzanne Plachette, and your whole Innkeeper show was just a dream. Your few years with your brother Daryl and your other brother Daryl was just something that you dreamed up.
Oh my god. Yeah, exactly like that TV show.
I mean, I understand there's more philosophy involved, and it's a little more deep than that, but ultimately I feel just like that's kind of what happens here. I mean, I've been talking about it our entire episode, where it's just you just erase pretty much that hour of TV that you watched.
Yeah, pretty much.
You get some story out of it. You get some character development. You get some story out of it, I guess. So, I mean, hey, that last Next Generation episode we watched was so bad that I would take that. Every episode could be It's All Just a Dream. And then the last episode of Voyager was, oh, we actually never left Deep Space Nine because we actually were just in the Hollow Suite. Like, I would accept that over Code of Honor. It's fine.
Yeah, Code of Honor is not kosher.
Mm-mm.
I mean, a fantastic episode, really. I like it. I mean, I've said a lot about it tonight. I mean, it brings up just so many things that you could question.
It's not a terrible episode. It really isn't. Like I said, I had no problem watching it. There wasn't really too much while I was watching it where I was like, ugh, or I was bored or anything like that. It was fine to watch. I probably thought more about it now talking with you about it than I ever really gave it credit for while I was watching it or taking notes or anything like that. So,
and you still have to remember, like, Voyager flies off like after this, but that conflict that was going on in the planet that they're in the middle, that they found themselves in the middle of, that's still going on in that society, and that's
right.
Like interesting. Like that conflict is still happening down there, and like a little bit of doom. I like at the very end when Kes is like, "Can you show me the planet on the view screen?" And they show the planet on the view screen, because, and I think what that says more than like, let me see, like, that it just didn't happen again. I think she wants to see it because it can happen on that planet, and she has to be resigned in the fact that this civilization has the capability to might destroy themselves.
Yeah,
and I think that last scene just like leaves you just like, on a hope and a prayer that society does get through. I think that's really good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even consider that society, that planet down there. But you're absolutely right. There's still that faction, kind of. I don't know, anti. I don't want to call it terrorism, but we were calling it terrorism earlier. But there is that kind of factional split in between the planet down there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very interesting. So what would you rate this?
Well, a Starfleet uniform hanging inside the window of a clothing shop.
I am going to rate it 1 police baton because I thought they were ridiculous looking. Oh, the headbands maybe. Okay, so like 1 police baton and 2 headbands because I thought the police headbands were just out of control. I did like their guns though. Their guns to me were really cool because it was like a mini shotgun. Like it was like an actual shotgun, but it was just looked futuristic. So like it was really cool to me.
Yeah, they did have that feel. I agree that it was almost like a gun as we know a gun, but shooting weird stuff and a little futuristic looking.
Yeah, that stuff was cool. I like that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, what's next in the program? We have...
Well...
Yeah, sorry.
I want to do one more thing because I think, like, I'm willing to skip the other clips that I put down because we already talked about them. I don't want to rehash it. But there is one thing that we didn't talk about in this episode, and it's a little piece of music by Jay Chataway, and it's right at the climax of the episode. And it's when Janeway is getting ready to do her little, like, sniper cell rogue kind of she broke away from everything, and she's gonna go stop those guys from doing whatever it is they're gonna do in the plant. And so let's just listen to this for a second.
I'll be back for you.
We'll be here.
Okay, so what I wanted to say about that is I love what Jay Chataway does. Like it starts out when she leaves Tom Paris after he got shot. So Tom and the kid are there, and she goes away, and you get that kind of elongated Voyager theme again, done with the French horn, although way more stressed out because it's got the like kind of marching beat underneath of it. And I like. One thing about this is I understand TV music, especially kind of that TV action music, is there basically to fill silence and nothing else. It needs to go unnoticed and unnoticed on purpose. And for a composer, I'm sure that's really hard. But what Jay Chataway does here, he almost makes it into a film score for that point where the music actually takes over. And I mean, it's nowhere on the grandiose level of like Star Wars or Jaws or anything like that, but it's where at this point, or that scene, the music really becomes its own kind of separate entity. And even listening to it now and not watching it, just hearing it in the headphones, and obviously during that clip there's one little bit of dialogue, and the rest of it is all just sound effects and pitter patter of boots hitting the ground. It takes its kind of own life and I think completely creates the scene, and I absolutely love when music does that, and it doesn't happen very often in TV shows, and this is, I think, a rare case where it really gets, as I put it, a film treatment into this episode.
Nice. I didn't even notice that. That was good. You picked that up. And I was like that. I mean, it's great. Like the dun bum 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 bum.
Yeah,
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's good, like little march kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Like the beginning part is really what caught me, where it's just like, oh, hey, there's the Voyager theme, but it's really like suspensed out with the march underneath it. So
I didn't notice that. That's really cool. You see my tweet on the GMA? They're like, "Happy March," and then I had a picture of John Philip Sousa, and I like quote, yeah, "I agree." That's corny. That was corny. It's a good pick, man. That was, geez, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah,
this episode deserves a lot more credit than it gets. I think we gave it a lot of credit today.
We did.
All right, let's get to this is talk about philosophical questions over here. Let's get to Film Trek.
Saddle up. Lock and load. Star Trek Insurrection is the #1 action movie in America. Movie people out! The New York Times calls it seductively appealing.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes. It was fun.
All right. So this week is mine, and I probably shouldn't have picked something so in depth on a Voyager episode, knowing that we like to talk a lot about Voyager. But I think we can do this topic briefly but adequately. So Nicholas Meyer, and this is why I thought about it, is because Nicholas Meyer is on the new Trek shows, like we talked at the top of the episode. Did not want to direct Star Trek 3. He was offered Star Trek 3, and he said, no, I'm not going to direct it because I don't do resurrection stories. We killed off Spock. That's it. I'm done. Obviously, he came back in 6 because by that time, all of the redoing and Spock was already back. So it was basically, at least I think the way he justifies it, basically as though it was almost a different timeline, even though it's not. So I mean, as powerful and emotional as the ending of Star Trek 2 is, when Spock dies, and the humility that Kirk has at the end of it, where he tears up and is even joyful about his age, and they're looking upon the Genesis planet, does the very idea and the very existence of Star Trek 3 undermine that whole ending?
What do you think?
Yes. My short answer. I think it kind of does.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you.
However, I will say I much prefer it to be a epic movie cliffhanger than what Into Darkness did, where Kirk is dead all of 10 minutes of the movie. Because, I mean, there was never any suspense. Like, I don't know. The first time I saw Into Darkness, I never thought Kirk was actually dead. I was just like, oh, well, he's going to come back. Like, just, I mean, they did that whole scene and that whole, like, pomp and yelling and emotional nonsense. In my reasoning, or in my opinion, as a pageant, because I always knew Kirk was going to be there.
Yeah, that's true. Do resurrection stories undermine death scenes?
So, I mean, I guess the underarching question is, does the very nature of the search for Spock belittle the Wrath of Khan?
Ooh, well... yeah, it does. I mean, because you can't take one without the other.
Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I love that they made that little trilogy out of it. I love that they did 2, 3, and 4, and it worked out as well as it did. And I like Star Trek 3. I think Star Trek 3 is a decent movie and not a bad Star Trek movie. But I do think it kind of undermines the finality that Star Trek 2 would have had. Because imagine if Star Trek 2 was the last Star Trek movie that you had out of the original series cast.
Yeah. Undermine it. I think that I don't think it enhances it any, to be honest. I mean, would you have been happy just like if Star Trek 2 just would have like ended the series, the movies, like just period, like that be the last movie?
See, and that's just it. Like, I mean, logistically and realistically, no. I'm glad that we have at least Star Trek 4 and Star Trek 6 that we got out of it. I mean, so for them continuing on the film series, there at least were 2 other movies after that that are really worth the while. And Star Trek 3, it, like I said, is not bad. Like I take that on surface value as a good movie. So I bring it into the real world, bring it realistically. It's cool. I'm glad that it happened, I guess. But I mean, there would have been something more mystique about it, if that's even the right word. If it just ended there, it would have been almost chilling if that's where Star Trek ended. So you have like the 3 seasons, the animated, and 2 movies, and that's all of Star Trek. That weird reality where it's just like, all right, we killed Spock. And then maybe maybe you can have like Next Generation or some other spin-off later on down the road, but the original series, like, that's it. And it's just like, oh man, you guys just burned it all down. Just said, all right, I'm done. There you go. I think there's I would give it a certain amount of respect if that's how it ended.
That would have been a bold move. But I mean,
Yeah.
in that regard, like, you'd have to admit, though, without the movies, like, then Star Trek isn't really... And just speaking of the original series, like, without the movies, the original series isn't much.
You're right. Yeah, because 70 some episodes and what equates to about 5 hours of film time is really not a lot of content.
Yeah. Not an episode, but like, or not a. I know it's not a TV, or it's not a movie. It's a TV show. But like, what if like Edith Keller, like, would you be let down like if she was resurrected like in an episode later, or like any character that died, like if Tasha Yar got like resurrected? Exactly.
It just like when you put it on like a smaller scale like that, it that would bum me out a lot more. I'm glad because it was Spock and because it was a movie and because they successfully created other movies after that were. I mean, Star Trek 6 is arguably as good as Star Trek 2, so obviously I'm happy that they continued on. But when you pull it down to that smaller scale of like, oh, and then Edith Keeler is just back all of a sudden for some reason, it's just like, well, why? Like that just ruins City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah.
It makes that episode pointless almost.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Skin of Evil would not have been, because I think Skin of Evil is a really good episode, but I don't think Skin of Evil would have been nearly as good if for some reason they brought Tasha Yar back somehow.
Yeah. I've always thought, like, not to make like a tangent, but unintentionally make a tangent. I've always thought Skin of Evil was a really good episode, and what tainted it was Tasha Yar's death.
Really?
Yeah, because I love the idea that a civilization tried to get rid of evil, which is not a concept that's tangible to get rid of, because evil can be anything that you think it is. But for a civilization to say, and have the ability to say, and follow through, and say, let's get all of our evil out of our bodies and put it in this pool of goo, and that's what it is. I think that's an interesting premise. I think that is a really interesting premise, that a civilization would want to purify itself, and all that you have left is this hateful, vengeful, crazy creature. That by itself is really fascinating to me, and I think that part of the episode is always looked over because at the end of the day, Tasha Yar died, and she died at the hands of this tar monster.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you said more in the past half minute about that episode than I actually remember, because mostly what I remember is that Tasha Yar died.
Yeah.
But that was impactful to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is impactful. I mean, how do you kill a character off, though, and it, like, not be... Because we could look at Spock's death. I think that's a good point, or a good thing. I think they handled it... They couldn't, like, make him be in an explosion, because you had to have that where it was, like, him dying and have that dying words. But I've always felt when you, like, kill off a character like that, it should be big. And I think a lot of people that make that point to, like, Skin of Evil, but they won't, and say, like, Tasha Yar just died, like a pointless, like, kind of a stupid death. But they won't look at, Spock, like, just putting on this, like, going into this containment thing, and then, grabbing the thing to, like, put over the tube, and then him dying. Like, they don't look at that and be like, yeah, that's kind of cheesy, because that is cheesy death.
Well, I mean, and it's Leonard Nimoy who was basically Star Trek. I mean, Spock at that point in time was what Star Trek was known for. Even now, I mean, when Leonard Nimoy died last year, it was huge, and it's just because he was super impactful that show. Like, what he created, what he did with that character is just iconic. And so for you to kill off your icon of that show, it is insane to do, and to make it as that movie does a final scene is crazy, and gives it a really weird kind of feeling. I mean, it's just like I'll compare it to like when Janet Leigh dies in Psycho. No one thought that a star like Janet Leigh was going to die in the first 20-30 minutes of a movie. So, you know, it was one of those things where Psycho had two twists in it, and one is the ending with Bates's mom, and the other one is Janet Leigh dying in the shower, because Janet Leigh was billed as the star of that movie, and Janet Leigh dies at the beginning of that movie. So people were just like, I have no idea what's going on here. It's just crazy. And to just throw that out there and say, like, here you go. Here's Janet Leigh, who is huge at the time, and then just, I got her in my movie, and then I'm just going to basically just piss her away on a quick death. It takes a lot of guts, and it's really interesting. And you know, when they're done well, when death scenes are done well, they're really good. And I do ultimately think, for storylines, if you were to bring those characters back, no matter how you do it, it kind of undermines what the original story was going for.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to say this too, like, as you mentioned, I love Psycho. And one of the coolest parts, I know this is a tangent, but I do have to mention this. Like, one of the coolest things in that is, you think at the beginning, because the whole movie centers around, it's at the beginning, like, she's stealing money. It's like a whole subplot. And like, at the very end, it just doesn't matter. Like, it's so cool that that Hitchcock throws away that plot point. It's just, that movie is one of the best movies ever made, like, in the history of movies. But I also wanted to say, because we talked a little bit about the Oscars at the beginning, I thought it was really cool that in their memory thing of people that passed, that they had Leonard Nimoy, and he was actually the last one at the Oscars.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, because I mean, it's been a solid year now. So
yeah, and they played Blackbird. This guy did. While they flashed the pictures of the stars that they lost, stars in the crew and stuff. And now it's hard to see that. It's like hard to see that guy, that man, and just know, like, that guy's gone.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, did you know there's a new Pee Wee Herman movie coming out?
Yeah, this month on Netflix.
Oh my god, he like hasn't aged. It's so hilarious. Sorry, that was like a weird segue. I know, but
I've been following him for a while, like on Twitter, and I'm anticipating this. I'm looking forward to it.
It's freaking hilarious. God, I love that man. So yeah, my answer also would be. But yes, I mean, they did it well, though. I think
they did do it well.
Had Star Trek 3... The only thing is, I don't like how Star Trek 3 is the Christopher Lloyd kind of... that Klingon stuff. Like, for me, like, that part, like, they didn't need. That part was so bad. But, like, had it been worse, alright, had Star Trek 3 been worse, I would have been more disappointed in the whole Spock death resurrection thing.
Yeah, I and then I don't like that Robin Curtis replaced Kirstie Alley, like that kind of, there's problems with Star Trek 3. There definitely are problems with Star Trek 3, but they made up for it. they brought it back. It's okay.
There's things about me, Dottie, that you'll never understand. You couldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. I don't understand, Pee-wee.
Oh.
All right.
Beyond.
Let's move on to our Trek.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
This time we'll handle things without your help.
They're doing their part. Are you?
What's your part?
All right. Well, I've got two things that I found. Well, one I found surprising because I didn't know, and one I found interesting. So there's this Twitter page. It's a Star Trek fan page. They don't have a whole lot of followers, but their Star Trek fan page, obviously, nonetheless, since they're called it. And they did one of those little Twitter polls where you can vote on one or the other. And their poll was, who is the best Star Trek captain? And the options were Kirk and Picard. And Picard overwhelmingly won. Picard 78% and Kirk 22%. And 404 people voted.
Wow.
And I just, like, I cannot believe that. Like, I find that offensive to my senses almost. Even though I mean, I love Picard, but I think, like, it should be, like, maybe 60-40 at most. Really, like, I don't like one that much more over the other. So it's so weird to me that it's like that. I don't know. Like, am I wrong, Chris? Like,
no.
Do you think it's?
No, Captain Kirk is so awesome. He really is. And it's
Kirk is my favorite. Like I mean, if it were just a poll of Sean's, it would be, Kirk at 80. It would be 80-20 Kirk's favor. But I understand why people like Picard. But I still thought that it wasn't so. And granted, again, it's only 400 people that voted, but apparently these people really like next gen fans.
So now, let me get this straight. Was there, like, no Janeway on this?
No, it was just Kirk and Picard.
All right. So, like, if I have a Kirk and Picard thing, it'd be Kirk over Picard. But if it's like a Kirk, Picard, Janeway thing, then it's like Janeway, then Kirk, then Picard. And, like,
then Sisko, then Archer?
No, like, then Archer, then Sisko.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least Archer has some sense of adventure. So I'm just gonna complain about doing nothing. That's Sisko. At least, like, Archer's like, never mind the wind, Ensign. Let's go out there. Let's have an adventure with this Vulcan I don't like, and I'll talk crap about.
I don't know. If I had to rank them real quick, I would do Kirk, Picard, Janeway, and then probably Sisko and Archer. And I think Archer comes in last because you get that weird Scott Bakula, squinty eye, I hate Vulcans, here's my beagle kind of nonsense in there, and it just bothers me.
Yeah.
I like Sisko being a dad. I find that a lot better than Archer squinty eye yelling.
Well, it does add a different depth to him. I'll give you that. All right. Archer's, Sisko is, DS9 is just hard to like. So.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
There's nothing.
I like Sisko though. I like Avery Brooks. I think that's where it comes down to it. Is I like Avery Brooks, so he gets some extra points.
Wasn't he arrested for something recently? Like, it was like a DUI.
Being crazy, because like a crazy person.
Sounds awesome. That makes me like him a little bit more.
If you watch The Captains or see him at conventions and stuff like that, he's weird. He's just a strange person.
That's awesome.
So the only other thing I got from Twitter over the past week was I had no idea, literally no idea, that LeVar Burton was the voice of I don't know the character's name, but Earth in Captain Planet.
Of the Earth?
Well, of the guy, he was the black guy that had the Earth ring.
Oh, okay. Oh my God, I didn't know that. Yeah,
the one that would go Earth. That was LeVar Burton.
Wasn't his name Kwame? something like that.
I don't know what it was. Yeah, something weird.
Oh man, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
No idea. Yeah, zero clue. So, yeah, that was something. Another little gem that Twitter provided me with in this last week that I did not know.
Oh, did you see the make Donald Drumpf again?
I did not.
You don't watch John Oliver? Oh my god, it's hilarious. But anyway,
I do not.
Yeah, that I did not know that about LeVar Burton. That is really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should look that up. Make Donald Drumpf again.
I will.
Because, that was his name. The dad changed it, or like the grandpa changed it. It was
actually, really?
Yeah, their last name was Drumpf, and he changed it to Trump.
Of course.
So I have a little bit of old/new/ probably this will destroy the game forever news for everybody out there. Okay, so a week and a half ago they announced that they're going to do a skill revamp. Why they're doing a skill revamp, I don't know. Ask the forums. That is a favorite topic of the day, because it is useless. Like, to go through another skill revamp. They've done this like once, twice. I'm trying to think. They've done this like 2 times. Okay, so I jumped on Tribble because I have to just say they did this like the most ridiculous way. Like, you had to create a new character, play through the tutorial. You couldn't even skip any parts of the tutorial. Then you had to get to the ferry, and then get to this console to get experience, just so that you could spend skill points to try to test out the new skill revamp, or just wait a week after the skill revamp was already up on Tribble to do it. But this is going live on Thursday on, in a couple of days on Holodeck. And I have to tell everybody out there, this skill revamp, it stinks. Like, it blows. Like, like they made it like, it's just so stupid. I don't even know where to begin, because at least the other one like looked more complicated. But because we can't have things look complicated and we want to, dumb everything down, it's like the equivalent from like going to using like a supercomputer to using like a speak and spell. Like, it seriously is like that, like dumbing down. And the skill revamp, I have to tell everybody, like, they told us that we can do our builds 1-to-1, so like we could create our build that we have already in this new skill set system and still have skill points left over. That's a lie. It's a lie. You're just not going to have your same build. And it is so dumbed down that it's like you don't even know where to spend your skills. So like, and what you end up doing is you just like, well, I'll just put everything in tactical. That sounds good. And then like they made these ultimates. They call them ultimates, which are like bonuses that you would have gotten anyway had you just known how to like spend your skill points in a great way already. Like, just find a build off STO Academy. There you go. But no, now they had to like dumb that down. But anyway, this skill revamp, I have to say, is probably, I don't know. I don't like to be Doom. There's the gaming term Doom. Everything is Doom. Like, I'm not Doom. I don't want to say like everything is Doom, because I've lived through Doom. I've lived through Delta Rising, so I know Doom and Star Trek Online. But this to me, and I'm not exaggerating about this, this to me is like the beginning of like what may be the end of Star Trek Online for the veterans. See, like for Sean, who doesn't have a character yet. See, if you were to come in, you would just be like, oh, okay, that's how I do my skills. Like, it wouldn't matter anything to you. But like somebody that's been there for like 4 or 5 years, like they're just like me, I'm just like, you know what? Here's my middle finger. I'll see you later. I'm gonna go play World of Warcraft. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what it's like. But the second bit of news that I have I don't know if I'm going to spoil anything, because I don't know how many of you kids out there listen to our podcast. But my fleet leader is getting a table at Star Trek Las Vegas this year, which is the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And I'm hoping to be there too in Las Vegas. And
that'd be nice.
We're going to have our fleet and everything. He's going to have his computer set up. He's going to be showing it all. So it'd be cool if people go to Star Trek Las Vegas and check out the Temporal Omega Ambassadors. Whoa,
sweet.
Whoa. Yeah. So, I've been representing here.
Oh, that'd be so cool if you got to go.
Yeah. I'd be so happy. Been once, like to go again, definitely for the 50.
Oh, yeah.
But skill revamp, man, it's not good. Sean, what do you think about that skill revamp?
I don't know. I understand you get used to doing something a certain way, and if they aren't improving on it, making it worse, then that sucks.
Yeah. I hate things dumbed down, because it encourages noobs. And I know people don't like the word noob. Like somehow I just said the most racist thing ever. I know. Like some people don't like the word noob. But I really hate that they make it so obvious that they want to open up the game to new players. It's fine for new players to come. That's not what I'm saying. I don't care. Whatever. If you want to play Star Trek Online, I encourage it. I want everybody to come to Star Trek Online. But for Pete's sake, don't break something that's not, or don't try to fix something that's not broken for the sake of making it look simple just to entice people to play. I don't like that, and I don't think any of the player base is revolting over this thing. So, which is funny. This one time, I remember when I was in school, I said, I told my teacher, I said, he didn't want, he wasn't going to accept any homework late or something. And I said, we're revolting, and he said, yes, you are. But anyway, so that's all I have for my thing.
All right.
Oh. All right. Let's get to audience track.
Open hailing frequencies.
Frequencies open, sir.
This is Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Enterprise. Klaxon Blaj Blanarnik Kamnik.
Do you ever think that we're gonna know that? Eventually by episode by 100, we'll just know that off the top of our head.
Just be able to say it like that.
Yeah.
Logic. Maybe. I don't know.
Blah, blah,
it took
blah.
Picard a while to learn it, but we listen to it every week, so.
We better know it by episode 100. Logic. All right. Do we have an email, Sean? What do we have? How do you get a hold of us?
You can get a hold of us at thetrekbrothers@gmail.com if you want to send us an email. That's the best way to get a hold of us. Tell us what you think about anything that we say, Pee-wee Herman or otherwise. You can get a hold of us on Twitter. Same handle as the email. It's at The Trek Brothers. You can find Chris at Lethargic Nerd. I said that a little weird. It's at Lethargic Nerd. And you can find me at Sean Makita on Twitter. We do have a website. It's got a blog on there. It's got all of our episodes. It's pretty kind of neat. It's thetrekbrothers.wix.com/home. And yeah, that's all the ways that you can get a hold of us. We have a very secret Google Plus account that I don't know anything about, and I don't think Chris does either. It just came with our Google account. So don't do that, because we don't know the handle and we don't check that. No. Finally, and most importantly, every single episode of the Trek Brothers is online and ready to go on our YouTube page. Just go to YouTube and look up the Trek Brothers. You will find us. It's that simple. We are completely and totally up to date as of right now. We fell behind for a little bit due to work and illness and just general life getting in the way, but we're back on track where we should be right now.
Yes. We're back on track like the crew of Voyager heading home. Oh, yeah, in the bag.
Yeah, well, after this, I'm going to erase, since this is my episode to edit, so I'm just going to erase the entire episode, and we're just going to have the news and this outro, and that's going to be it.
Sweet. You'll never know what happened. Nice. I'm going to take you out on a little song that's called Time Warp by Acoustic Groove Machine. I think Time Warp is appropriate. That's why I chose it.
Fair enough. Is this like Rocky Horror Time Warp?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
That's why we gotta do the Time Warp.
Again.
You know, Janeway did the Time Warp. It's a true story. Well, I'm going to take off, and I'll tell everybody out there, I hope you liked today's episode, because I love Star Trek Voyager. But if it's not, that's okay. Hey, listen, you can like any Trek you want. I really don't care, so long as you like Star Trek. I'm Chris. I'll talk to you later.
And I'm Sean. Bye.
Jump to the left, and then a step to the right. Put your hands on your hips.